All right, guys, Anthony with Austin Historical Weapons Guild here, once again digging into more Longsword. Picking up from where we left off last week, we're going to dig into a little bit more about footwork and hopefully start tying that together into the ideas of Zufectin, or the pre-fencing, Krieg, which is war and the bind, and then either going to Ringnam Schwart or the Abzug, the retreat, pulling away. A lot of this is going to be based on the way I like to fight, the way I like to fence and move, and really building off of the solid base from basically hips up that I talk about a lot. So keeping back fully engaged, core, and a little bit of bend at the hips here, but we're not looking for a really flat back. Just trying to avoid this kind of upright posture, which is really easy to start breaking backward and losing structure, losing balance, losing position. So one of the first things, which I don't think I've gone into in this video series, is your basic types of footwork, basic types of movement. So again, revisiting our stance real quick. I will do this demonstration in downward leg forward. You should be able to do this either way. Footwork, feet should be intermixed right here. You'll do these other foot forward is going to help a lot as well. So just practice this to make sure you're switching and moving. So three primary types of footwork that I think almost everyone will tend to talk about, probably different names. The first one I started off with is called a simple step, and that is whichever direction I want to move, that foot moves first. To move forward, my front leg is going to go. Move backwards, my back leg is going to go, and it doesn't really matter. So this is sometimes I've seen heard called a shuffle step or a push step or things like that. But the real focus here is that I'm going to pick up that direction I want to go, let myself immediately move in that position, and then I reset, bring myself back to my stable stance. So again, it's a real simple concept. You can think about it as pushing off the back leg. You can think about it as almost falling forward as the foot comes up, depending on how you want to move, what position you're in. But this alone, this way of moving, is going to reinforce the idea of how close together your feet should be, right? So I've got a convenient mark on the floor here. So if my back toe, the front toe is on this line, I want to make sure that I don't move too far. Because if I'm out long like this drastically limits my ability to get in another simple step, and overextends. Is much harder to move from here without a full gather there. So simple step, whichever direction you want to go, that's the foot that moves first. The opposite to this is what I call a gather step. And this is where if I move forward, my back leg comes up, I plant in this neutral position, and I extend out. Move backwards, same thing. This really focuses on bringing your feet, I generally say together. Together is a bit of an oversimplification. You can think together, coming in a neutral stance or a 0-point stance below yourself. You think about just bringing it up so they're parallel but not together, and working from there. Either of those options, either those scenarios are good. But again, the focus here is I want to gather myself to a position, then reset and move. This is, or should be, distinct and different than planting your feet and taking 2 steps. We're not trying to bind time, hold time here. We'll talk a little bit about tempo and timing and things like that later on today. But really working on, this should not be I step and I step and I move there. We want this to be a single motion, right? So almost like a skip. So I'm coming and I'm resetting, right? So really focus on when you're practicing this, when you're working on these, it should not be I step here, I wait, I step here. Really trying to make these as smooth and fluid as you can, despite being separate motions, separate intentions, separate drives. Quick note, the differences and the pros and cons of these types of motion. A simple step is going to be a faster reaction move, right? If someone's coming at me and I move away quickly, I don't want to gather up and push back, because you can see most of my motion comes on this push back. Instead, I want to think about like, oh, I need to move quick, making sure you come back here. Related though is I want to really make sure I'm moving with my hips. I'm pulling back from there, And I'm not, again, bringing the shoulders back, leading myself to get knocked over, pushed over, any of those bad things that happen when you're wrestling. The flip side, of course, with the gather step is I can be discreet and I can really decide where I want to go, how I want to go much later. If you have your opponent watching your chest, watching your face, watching your hands that are above your head, they're not going to see, or very unlikely to see, this type of motion. I can do this without moving my upper body at all. So now I can move in. That gives me a little bit of extra time to decide where I want to go. And you can also spring a little bit deeper with a gather step than you can with a good simple step. So what I mean by that, if I take a simple step at a normal rate that I can gather or reset out of easily and comfortably, it's probably about to the edge of that line. Any deeper, I start getting stuck and I can't move as easily. But I can simple step to about there and move through. And just finding that position where it's comfortable for you. If I gather step, yes, I can take a small gather and get the same position. But if I gather and kind of add a simple step at the end of it, I can get much further, almost unexpectedly further, if your opponent isn't being very careful, managing their distance, managing your footwork, and controlling that position. So that's something I do a lot, often unconsciously. I'll gather up, I'll kind of spring forward and still finish in a nice rooted position versus doing the same with a simple step, kind of wind up here. You even saw on this floor, that foot kicked out a little bit. Not great for fencing, not great for fighting, not great for moving. So practice those, play with those, start building those up into your unconscious repertoire, your sandbox of things you can do, ways you can move, and you can do these things brushing your teeth, standing around, watching TV, get up, move, be active, practice those things. And while you're doing it, again, emphasize that stance, that structure, just a little bit of core engagement, shoulder engagement, get yourself used to moving in these positions. The next steps I'm going to talk about are passing steps, which is more intuitive and less intuitive than you expect. So passing step, as I describe it, it's basically like you're walking down the street, right? You switch which foot's in front and you close distance that way. And this is what everyone does, hopefully without thinking by now, but I want to draw your attention to it and think about and modify it a little bit for fencing. So again, this is why I always admit, like I have Eastern martial arts background. I did a mix of Taekwondo, karate, judo, and aikido for 5 or 6 years. And one of the big things, if you know karate, is this idea of C-stepping, where you're in a nice, deep, heavy stance, bring your feet together, extend it back out. Right? And this kind of in and out motion is heavily seen in the, I believe, Shotokan karate. I can't speak beyond that, but it's important. And I've definitely incorporated that movement into my fencing, because if I'm going here, you have no idea if I'm going to gather step or if I'm going to continue with a passing step, or I can even just slam on the brakes and go backward again if all of a sudden there's a sword point in front of me. That ability to decide as the attack is happening, as the reaction is happening, is enormously beneficial compared to that kind of, to exaggerate, this big dumb step like this, because with that step, with that kind of walking step, as soon as this foot's in the ground, you're not stopping it. By training yourself to keep A, low, and B, bring into the center, you have a lot easier time arresting that momentum, because now we're stepping underneath in front of ourselves, able to push back, versus just this kind of step. You're gonna have a harder time getting that to change and arrest your motion, especially if you're moving in earnest like you should be in a fight. So that's my bias, that's my twist on it, this kind of passing step, working from there. The last step I'm going to talk about, which is important to have, to know and understand, but definitely comes later on in your fencing movement experience. I've generally just heard called a compass step. So it's kind of like a passing step, but not. So a compass step, instead of stepping orthogonally on this vertical line, I'm going to rotate and change this angle. So you can compass step with either foot, either direction. It's about getting that offline movement and changing the plane of, if not your attack, of your body. So you'll see a lot of people compass step when they're throwing Zverkas. From here, they'll compass around and try to do that. If you do rapier at all, this is a girata, where you make the thrust here and go away. Notice I'm taking my body from this line to out of the way over here. And it's definitely useful for, again, changing angles of the fight. If you're close for wrestling on the sword, the ring and Longsword, getting to that position, working from here, and taking this compass step around gives you a lot of options to start playing with and utilizing to attack sides, attack other angles, and basically work around your opponent's sword without taking multiple steps. Obviously, the risk of the compass step, two primary ones at least, is first is you're definitely risking crossing your feet. If you don't time or step these correctly, your feet are going to be crossed, and if you get pushed on this cross line, the odds of you tripping and falling over are very, very high. The other risk is a little less obvious and something to pay more attention to, is that you could pull yourself out of the fight if you're not paying attention, not very careful with how you're moving. So what I mean by that is if I'm throwing cut and I step around like this, if I'm not paying attention, you can already see my back is broken, I'm pulling away, and I'm going this way, not whatever I'm fighting against. So against the pelts, you can see hopefully a little bit better. If I throw my cut and I come in for a second cut, I'm already out. I may make contact, but there's nothing good to it. There's no power behind it. So if you're going to build that into your fencing, into your box of tricks, really focus on getting your hips set back. So as you move, you're still leaning forward, engaged, and ready to fight the person in front of you. So that's all good and well, and there's lots of ways to move, and this is skimming the surface. But how do we start using these? How do we start thinking about drilling these, and what does that all really mean? So straight up, the passing or the simple step, passing step, those are things that you'll almost exclusively be using in the pre-fencing. If you really want to get someone to move, you may be doing things like this, moving around here, but never passing this in until you're ready to move and bait and attack. It's very easy with this type of footwork, whether you're doing simples or gathers, to control this distance, control this space. Whereas if you're doing a full passing step, you're definitely engaging a lot more of your body, more commitment. You're pulling yourself in almost whether you want to or not. Not to mention you're losing whatever tactical advantage you're starting to set up, right? So unless I'm very confident with what I'm doing, how I'm approaching, and you'll see this in a lot of sparring videos, people approach like this or like this, where they're trying to find that distance and move things around. And these simple steps or these gather steps don't really happen with much thought, which is why it's really important to take some time and really focus on how you want to move, how you want to do things, and how you want to train yourself to engage with an opponent. Passing steps, obviously with good cuts, are going to come out from there. We always talk about cutting through there. And that leads us to an interesting conversation about timing of the body, timing of the feet, timing of the hands, and things like that. Better, more recognized people than myself have put together good videos that kind of explain the different tempos of the body. In short, you have timing of the hands or arms, which let you swing the sword and move things around. Your body, you can do some leans, moving from there. It'll give you a little bit more reach if you lean in. And then you have your feet, which are the slowest, but also cover the most distance. So I come in here and I strike, right? This is nice and slow. If I'm here, already right foot forward. This is a little bit faster. If I'm here, I just snap it out, fastest yet. So we need to know and understand how to apply those things, how to tie them together. And that can definitely be a whole hour-long lecture if we really want to tie into that. The main thing I really want to get across and help people become aware of is that, I guess, two parts is why we want to, strike with the hands, right? This idea of true time comes from, I believe, George Silver, which is way after the longsword period that we're talking about with the Ringek, Meyer, KDF. But the important thing is that it makes sense that it applies. We don't have any baseline for those tempos, those constraints in the longsword tradition, at least in those periods that I'm familiar with. But the idea that, if I just step in and then swing and try to hit the other person, there's a huge window that they could hit me before I make my distance to close off. So it only makes sense that as I move in, I want my hands to move first, close off that line, keep myself protected as I drive in to try to hit the other person. Building off of that is, depending how I play my cards, how I make my attack, how I make my intentions known, I can start doing fun things like telegraphing this attack and then pulling it short and doing something else. We can start playing this idea that if I want you to think I'm coming in with this haymaker of a sword cut coming through like that, I don't need my arms to telegraph that intention. I can do that almost entirely with my feet, with my legs. So what does that mean? That means that my arms can still do whatever they want because they have not yet committed to an action. And this concept, this idea of taking intentions and taking actions and breaking them apart and getting yourself to move more freely, more quickly, and in, I don't want to say unexpected ways, but less intuitive ways, will start giving you a whole bunch of opportunities to exploit in your fencing. So quick example is the favorite one that I like to do. And we'll pretend that my opponent here is swinging at my sword. So like I always talk about, I'm not striking to hit the person. And keep in mind, this target here, because the sword is so far back, the person is way back here. Realize you can't see that. Person is way back here. So even though I'm hitting this on the opening, this is still ending up, that same 8, 12 inches from the person's face that I look for when I'm finding my distance, when I'm working through with my plays. So again, I'm going to just telegraph the biggest, dumbest strike I can right here, and I'm out, and my hands are done. Right at this point, my hands aren't going to do anything because I come down. Sure, I can pull a little bit, but I don't decide to do that till about here. And odds are I'm not actually going to do that because it's big and dumb and telegraphic. And if I'm really lucky, they're going to swing at my sword to stop that haymaker from coming through. So as I do that, my opponent nicely swings at my sword. I can just drop underneath and set up my own attack. And because they're swinging at my sword, I don't need to worry about it. I can just let it pass through and happily stab them from the other side, which ties into our Dirk Vexel talk from a couple weeks ago. But really just this idea of, I've not committed my arms. They can do whatever they want. They can just stay here and wait if I wanted to and just go like tap afterward if they're really exaggeratingly swinging away from me. But this idea that I can telegraph motion and then pull it away because my arms haven't acted yet, being able to break apart my actions, my intentions into not just being, I attack, now I can't do anything. Now it becomes, well, my feet have moved. What are my arms going to do? It starts becoming, okay, my body has moved. What do my arms and feet want to do? And you can start pulling yourself and manipulating your lines, your attack, your angles, your motion in, as I said, basically unintuitive, unexpected ways to make your fencing seem much faster, much more controlled than perhaps it should look. So, favorite example again, I'm here, I'm telegraphing this big dumb attack, but I'm not actively engaging my arms. At any point during this motion, because I'm not chopping wood, I can go, actually, let's not do that. Let's pull that out there instead. Or let's not do that, let's turn this one out instead. And there's fun options you can start exploring with and playing with by just learning how to break apart the way your body moves. And again, your 3 primary examples are going to be your hands, your arms, whatever you want to think of this as. It talks about being arms, it's really your shoulders, neither here nor there. Your body, whether you lean forward, you lean off to the side, and then your feet. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you some new ways of thinking about footwork and movement and how that ties into timing, and start combining and playing with kind of these tricks and ideas we're talking about tonight. So as always, guys, if there's any questions or comments, feel free to reach out, comment below, hit us up on Facebook, or send us an email through the website, anything like that. If not, I'll have another new Fabrics video for everyone on Wednesday, and I'll see everyone again on Friday night. Thank you. Or Monday night, man.